Welcome back to Music Free Static. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And today we're going to dive into a really late movie review of 2014's The Imitation Game. It has war, it has math, it has homophobia. Yes, it has all of those things. We're going to dive into a really, really good telling of part of the life, anyway, of Alan Turing. Now, for those of you who don't know Alan Turing, which I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't, but Turing built what was referred to at the time as the Turing machine. That became the basis of what we now call computers. Yeah, the Turing machine was fundamental to modern computing. And it all started in World War II. Okay, well, I mean, maybe a little before that. We'll get into it. So, The Imitation Game stars Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing. He was a math professor at King College, I think it said. I think he was. Forgive me, I sometimes forget things. Yes, so he was a professor, one of the best mathematicians in the world. You know, so he was doing okay. Well, it's coming up now, 1939, and of course, we're looking at the start of World War II. The Germans have started to conquer Europe. They've set their sights on England, and pretty much the only thing that saves England is the English Channel to begin with. So here's the deal. The Germans have a way of encrypting their messages, okay? Turns out, encryption is a thing, right? Countries have been encrypting messages for a very, very long time. And the Germans had invented a code that was pretty much unbreakable. Okay? At least that was the theory. They had a machine they called the Enigma. And Enigma was an interesting machine. It was a cipher. It was a sort of a substitution cipher. It was all sorts of fun. You can dive into the math and stuff. It was really cool. But it meant that the Germans were able to communicate and the English couldn't intercept their messages. Okay. So they set up a project in Bletchley Park to break this encryption. And they hired a number of people to be on the team, but Alan Turing was one of them. Well, he's turns out Turing is not the nicest guy to be around, okay? He ends up playing it basically like, I'm not sure how accurate this was to Turing in his real life, but Cumberbatch basically plays him as sort of an autistic, jerk. Guy who doesn't understand people in any way, shape, or form, which, to be fair, there's a lot of people like that. I've met some people like that. I think I'm related to people like that. So, but they hire him, and the team sets out to start to crack the code. But Turing has an approach, right? He wants to build a machine to break the code. He wants to build a computer. Well, the commander, who Turing gets sideways of early, okay, unsurprising, says, no, thou shalt not. And if you want to complain about it, you can go to Winston Churchill. Well, Turing does, because he doesn't know he can't. And he gets named leader of the project, and they start work. Okay, so that's sort of the setup. And historically, we know what the results was. The results were fairly amazing. They did, in fact, break the code, and all sorts of good things happen. But there is some amazing storytelling that happens throughout the movie. I mean, if you get all the fun stuff of, okay, Turing and his team struggling to break a code that changes every 24 hours. 18, maybe, if you consider that, okay, they changed it at midnight. It did change every 24 hours, but their first radio intercepts with the new message happens about 6 in the morning. So you've got 18 hours to break the code, and they can't do it. So, right. So they're building this machine to go through it. Now, that's not to say they haven't decrypted a few of the messages from time to time. Most of them are radio intercepts or like weather intercepts, things like that. They're useless, and they were broken. That particular message may have been decrypted weeks later. I mean, it's just not a thing, right? So, what goes on? So there's some fun stuff with throughout this movie, and honestly, it's a very serious movie, but it's so well told. I mean, you've got the commander who doesn't like Turing. You have the team that doesn't like Turing. Turing finds an amazing mathematician, Joan Clark, who has the audacity to be a woman in 1940. Okay. Not only are we going to deal with homophobia, we get to deal with sexism and cultural issues at the time. Okay. Cool. So they managed to work through some of that, kind of, but there's some interesting things with that as well. And Keira Knightley does a great job as Joan. But one of the things that Joan does for Turing is says, hey, look, you can't, you have to be nice to people, right? I think her line is, when Turing asks her, you were nice to them, and why were you nice to them, and why were they nice to you? She says, I am a woman working in a man's world. I can't afford to be an ass. It's like, oh, and that things sort of click for Turing, and she helps him through it. He starts to be, at least reach out to the rest of his team. That doesn't mean they like him in some ways, right? But at least they don't. At least they stop being quite as antagonistic, right? The guy who was on the team and ends up getting replaced by Turing, Hugh, I think was his name, never does particularly like Turing, but he starts to, once Turing sort of reaches out, he's like, okay, I don't like you, but I actually see where you're going with this. And he has some suggestions for the machine, and there's lots of fun stuff. But in and amongst all of this, one, somebody thinks there's a Soviet spy in the group. Turns out there is. We'll get to that. And hey, there's this overarching problem of, I guess the problem, it's not necessarily a problem during the main part of the story. Really, it's that Turing was gay, okay? And what we get as we go through the movie is intercuts, flashbacks of Turing growing up, learning about cryptography and ciphers, a friendship and potential, I guess his first love when he was a kid in school. And it's all framed with, hey, these investigators have come to a report of a robbery at Turing's house, in 1950 something, and they start an investigation. And this is, it's like, what happened? Doesn't say anything was robbed. Basically says go away. Yeah, all of this is sort of interweaved throughout the story of what was Turing's was Turing doing during the war? His war record is empty. I mean, there was some weird, highly classified, unsurprisingly. Well, the fact that he's gay and Joan is a woman has some interesting things that come up because, hey, her family doesn't like the fact that she's working with all these men. She's in her 20s and unmarried, right? Oh, heaven forbid. So, right, her family wants her to come home. And she has a very legitimate thing here, right? She wants to be working, but she doesn't want to lose her family, right? This is a really important thing here because I know there's a lot of modern storytelling, a lot of things that say, oh, well, she'll just blow off her family because obviously her job is more important. But, and her job was really important, okay? Yeah, we're talking about defeating the Nazis here. This is an important thing to be doing. But her family's important to her. She doesn't want to lose them. And that's okay. That's a good thing. So what does she do? Well, Turing takes the steps and, all right, well, basically he proposes and they go on. But again, he's gay, right? So that leads to some interesting discussions. And a really interesting discussion between the two of them as they're engaged. And he's afraid that the fact that he's gay is going to come out and is going to destroy his work. He discovers and confronts the spy, who also knows that Turing is gay. Now, why is being gay an issue? Well, because in 1940-something, it was illegal in Britain with some rather serious consequences. So, yeah, this is a thing, right? So you get all of this stuff interweaved. You get all of the challenges. You've got a commander who doesn't like them, right? All of this it's told so amazingly well. And the casting is great and the characters are fun. You really only, I don't know, say focus when it comes down to it. I mean, Turing is obviously the main focus. Joan is there all the time. And she stands out partly because, yes, she is the only woman in the cast almost. But then the other characters are there. I mean, some of them, like the commander, is pretty much a one note. He hates you and everything about you, and that's just all there is to it. It's like his goal in life is to see Turing fired and maybe hanged, as a spy. So, it's fairly one note there, but he plays it so well. But it's interesting as they're running through the challenges of how to actually solve the problem. And this is one of those cases where I love the solution. The real life solution is fun, and how they show it here in the movie is great. So let me break down what happened in the movie. They're at basically a celebration of Joan and Turing's engagement. Okay, Hugh has his eyes set on this other woman that Joan is talking to, that she knows from where she's staying. And as they go over there, they're chatting. There's a bunch of interesting, flirting and back and forth. And the friend, Helen, I think, talks about how, oh no, she's got the way she puts it is just, she's falling for a guy that she works with, and it's this radio operator in Germany. So they're like, okay, how and why? And she says, okay, I'm sitting there. We're all assigned a different radio operator. So they're listening to this broadcast out of Paris and out of, whatever, right? And she says, well, you get to recognize somebody's style. And I says, yep, but I know this guy has a girlfriend. And it's like, well, how do you know? It's like, because he starts every message with the same 5 characters, Cilly. And it says, probably his girl. And meanwhile, and Turing is sitting here, it's like, wait a minute. Those first 5 letters are supposed to be random. So, yeah, and this one isn't. And it triggers something. And Turing goes racing back to the lab, the whole team, he said, nope, all right, we're out of here. They all race back with him. And he looks at one of the decrypted intercepts. Okay. Yes, there's the 5-character prefix that throws all this fun stuff off, but the weather report, sunny, here's the weather, sunny, blah, 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 Heil Hitler, right? And they look at this message and they realize we don't have to try to decrypt the whole thing because it's a cipher. You just have to determine the key. We just have to figure out, we just need to look for the repeated words that we know are there. And the words that are always there are Heil Hitler, right? That's what's there. And because of that, they're then able to basically program the machine to look for those characters. And after that, they're able to decrypt the messages. And the real life story is pretty much that. As they realize that, yes, we could do, there are lots of ways of attacking a substitution cipher, but they're all kind of slow, at least doing it by hand. But when you've got a machine that can start looking for, we're looking for these 2 words, run all of the combinations of letters for these words, and they got it. There's some interesting stuff that comes out of this. There's a great conversation that Turing has with the detective who has arrested him now in the future, when talking about the differences. He starts talking about the paper he wrote, The Imitation Game, which is where the title of the movie comes from, but what in modern computer science we refer to as the Turing test. Okay, and the Turing test has been the test to determine if a person is talking to a machine or to a person. It's, if you ask questions of the machine, can you determine if the answers are coming from a human, right? Is a human giving you the answers? And he has this conversation when asked if a machine can think, right? Which is interesting as we're looking at this age of large language models and quote unquote artificial intelligence. Can computers think? And the line in the movie was great. It says, of course, machines can't think as people do. A machine is different from a person, hence they think differently. As just because something thinks differently from you doesn't mean it's not thinking, right? This is absolutely an approach to take with the people around you, right? Just because they think differently from you doesn't mean they're not thinking, right? And this is definitely something I need to think about in my own life is, right, if their lived experiences cause them to approach problems differently, does that mean they're idiots because they come to a different conclusion from you? The reality is, and he goes on, is this, we allow for humans to have such divergences from one another, right? And he goes through this whole list. You like strawberries, I hate ice skating, you cry at sad films, I'm allergic to pollen, right? All of these differences, because we all have them. It's fascinating, but as he ends this with almost that this sort of sci-fi thought, okay? As he talks about, if we can accept that human brains work differently and we think differently, it says if we can say that about one another, then why can't we say the same thing for brains built of copper and wire, steel? Right? That is a fascinating thought. Okay. Now, you start moving into modern computing and AI and all of that stuff, and you start, thinking, is this really is this computer really thinking? Is it not? At the moment, I go for not. But a lot of the models we have today have passed the so-called Turing test. Okay. They've passed the test because a lot of them you can't tell if a human is giving you an answer or not. But it's not consistent, it's not constant, it's not right. You can look at sometimes a large block of text and say, yep, this was AI generated. Images tend to have that same thing. You can look at them and say, yeah, this is definitely AI generated, right? But that thought of, hey, if it thinks differently, like the way it thinks, does it mean it's not thinking? Right? These are fabulous things to think about. It's the basis of science fiction, right? If something is different, what does that mean? And is that difference important? Now, this also has a second meaning because Turing has been arrested because for I forgot the term they use, but gross indecency, I think. Because I think in the movie they had him soliciting a male prostitute or something like that. But yeah, it's thinking differently. Okay. This leads to some problems and ultimately Turing's death. Okay. But there's another interesting ethical question that comes up, and it is a really hard question, okay? And this is one of those things that I guess science fiction in general always gives some of these interesting questions. This is science fact, science history, right? They break the code. And in the movie, it's fairly dramatic, is that they break it. They said, yep, we know now where all of the shipping in the North Atlantic is, right? They know where the British ships are. They now know where all the German ships are because they've got all these radio intercepts. And they look at the map and they realize that the Germans are about to sink a passenger convoy. They're about to send a bunch of civilians to the bottom of the sea. And one of the cryptographers on the team, his brother is on one of those ships. Okay, so it just to really drive the point home here about actual lives being at stake. They realize what's going on. Hugh races to the phone to warn everybody, and Turing's like, tears the phone away from him. They have a small fight with a fun repeated themes, about, people like violence because it feels good, right? That comes up a couple of times, but he has this thought, and they have this debate, and it is 100% true, and it is 100% scary. If they were to warn off the British shipping and get British bombers over the German U-boats to bomb the snot out of them, what happens? The Germans realize that the English have broken their encryption, and they immediately stop using it. Right? All of the work, they said it took them like 2 years to break this code. And if they warn off the ships, then the Germans know, and they break the code, and everything is crazy. If rather than warning them off, they let the attack happen, they know that they'll be able to continue listening in on the German messages, right? Because heck, the Nazis are winning the war, right, at this point. So, what do you do? And there's that discussion. It's like, okay, they meet with a guy from MI6 who's sort of the shadowy figure throughout this, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. But to realize that, okay, we've broken the code, but we can't let them know. We can't let the Nazis know we've broken the code. Heck, we can't even let the Allies know we've broken the code necessarily, because we need them to keep using it so we can keep listening in, which means you are going to know about attacks that are coming and you have to let them happen or not. And how do you decide which ones you stop, which ones you let through, which ones you exploit, right? And it's a really, ethically, this is a really interesting discussion. I mean, the right answer, I think, is the one they took, is like, yes, we have to let some of these happen, because if we don't, we lose our advantage and we lose the war. And that is you're starting to really play with people's lives, right? Now, that's kind of true in war in general, but it is a scary, scary thought. Okay, so let's talk about MI6. So there's this agent, he's there at the beginning, and he's sort of the, I don't want to say backdoor into things, but he's always sort of there, kind of, either he's there, not necessarily in the shadows, but you kind of feel him, the shadow of MI6 over the whole thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, this is their, anytime they start running into issues with the Navy, right, who the commander is part of, and actually getting their work done, they go to MI6. And they go to this guy. And when Turing figures out that the member, or which member of his team is a Soviet spy, he goes to confront he goes to confront him for one thing, and the spy says, yeah, you're not going to tell them anything, because if you do, I'll tell them your secret that you're gay, right? It's like, oh, right, and that, you know, the consequences are pretty intense. So Turing isn't going to tell, right? Because he's going to say, nope, I have to stay. I've got to protect myself, right? And he runs into the spy master from MI6 at the home of, or I think I don't know if it's Joan's home or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, no, she's in prison, and because we think she's the spy. And Turing's like, no, that's not. The real spy is, and he names his team member. And the spy's, oh yeah, I know. It's like, what? Yeah, the MI6 is, yeah, I totally know he's the spy. Because knowing who the spy is gives me a direct way of getting information, essential information for the war, to the Soviets. They can leak things so they can be more effective against the Nazis. Remember, the Soviets and the English are allies at this point. The United Kingdom and the Russians, they're allies. Okay? All right, remember, there was that thing, I forgot what the movie was, but it got the snot memed out of it for years of, it was Hitler in his bunker railing against everybody. Downfall maybe was. But he goes on this rant about Stalin, right? Remember, the Stalinists have taken over Russia, right? For good or for ill, mostly for ill, but they're part of the Allies, the Americans and the United Kingdom and the Soviets. Those are the main allies. Okay, and then you've got a couple of that are also there, right? So France would be there, except they're conquered. So, what's going on? Australia is part of the United Kingdom, but, so they're fighting. But anyway, all of this stuff. And so you really start to see some of all the fun machinations of spycraft and stuff. And it's just fascinating to see all of it. And I have done a horrible job of walking you through it. Really, watch the movie. It is freaking amazing. But to finish out Turing's story here, it's discovered, course, that he's gay. Obviously, this is illegal, right? So what happens? He's convicted, and he's given a choice. He can either spend 2 years in prison, or he can go through hormone therapy and chemical castration. And he chooses the latter because he can't be away from his computer. And it does all sorts of bad things to him. You can go read Turing's history, but it messed him up. Okay, it was not a good thing. And honestly, that whole law was not a good thing. Okay, you can't treat people like that. Fortunately, we finally at least gotten past that aspect of it, but holy cow, it was bad. And it was so bad that Turing, the common consensus is that Turing died. Well, they know he died from cyanide poisoning. They believe it was a suicide. There is a theory that maybe it wasn't suicide, it's that he was working with these chemicals, and because he was working with these chemicals all the time, he managed to poison himself. That I don't know the truth, but the consensus right now is, and has been for years, is that he died by suicide. Okay, because in part of the symptoms he was dealing with, and the fact that because of the homophobia at the time, he couldn't work. Right? I mean, it's just, here he was. He and his team did as much to win the war than anybody else. Right? Yes, they talk about the pilots who protected the island during the those early stages of World War II. Yes, absolutely, they were huge. The soldiers who finally they invaded Europe on the beaches of Normandy, and all up and down the coast on D-Day, and pushed their way and fought their way across Europe. Yes, all of that was intense. All of that was important. None of that would have mattered if Turing's team hadn't broken the Enigma, right? And Joe has the speech for Turing. It's like, I rode a train through a town that wouldn't exist if we hadn't done our job. I bought a ticket from a man who might be dead because we broke this encryption. I mean, it really puts the work of this team in perspective. And that work was basically, it was classified for like 50 years after the war. And they talk about that at the end is, all right, we've won the war. Congratulations. Destroy the machine, or I'll burn all the materials, burn all the notes, and we're going to save this machine. And the reason is, hey, nobody knows we've broken this encryption. So we need to be sure that nobody knows, because people will keep trying to use it. There are other Enigma machines. There are other things. It's nice to know that we have the way of breaking the code that nobody else has. Yeah, it's crazy when you start looking at all of these secrets that you need to deal with when dealing with war, right? So yeah, it's fascinating. It is a really, really good movie, and I think it handles most of the issues that come up tastefully. Okay, it rarely dives into anything that is. I think there's one off-color-ish joke and or story at a bachelor party. Okay. But it is really, really, really tame. And I'm trying to think. I don't think there was, if there's profanity in it, it's very light. There's obviously there's some intense themes. There's talked about the themes of homophobia and suicide and sexism in the 40s. It's so there's some serious things here, but they handle it all tastefully, okay, and with a little bit of class, right? They don't shy away from it, but they don't really start beating you over the head with it until sort of the end epilogue, but it is very, very good. Highly recommend if you have the chance to watch The Imitation Game. I think you can watch it for free on Tubi right now, Tubi TV, if you don't mind watching it with commercials. Otherwise, find it on demand somewhere. It's probably streaming somewhere, but it is so very, very good. I cannot recommend it enough. And let me know if you've seen it. Let me know what you think. I watched it again last night because I thought, I really need to talk about this. And, I cannot get over how good a movie this is. So, until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Static signing off.